Hey, I'm RJ Murdoch, and this is Tech Tips and Tricks TV, as I like to call it, T3 TV. And today I want to do a review on an ISO recorder because recently I was doing an event. I had 3 PTZ cameras, 2 long-form cameras. Long-form cameras were recording. I had Zoom on the audio recording from the soundboard as well as the ambient. And I had a Atomos Shogun Flame as my master recording coming off of my ATEM production switcher. And about 18 minutes into the program of this once-in-a-lifetime event with guest speakers and honored guests coming from all over the country, I realized that I had inadvertently double-tapped on my Shogun Flame, and so I only had a few seconds at the beginning recording, and then I missed everything else until that 18-minute point where I realized it and hit recording. Now, I was switching between side cameras, back behind the stage towards the audience cameras, and my 2 stage and close-up cam from back where I was switching this entire time, and I was able to finish the entire rest of the event recording that. For the first 18 minutes, I had to go back into post-production and be able to create an edited version between the multiple camera angles. Unfortunately, I only had 2 camera angles to work with. Luckily, they were recorded in 4K, so it gave me a little bit of framing capability, but there were some wonderful angles off of either side of the podium and from behind the guest speaker with the audience in frame. And there's nothing I could have done about it. After that 18 minutes, everything looks great, but that first 18 minutes, the impression's already there. This is an okay video. It's mediocre. I was like, and if only I was able to go back, if I had recordings from each of the PTZ camera feeds, I would have been able to edit it back in and save the day. So, I mean, I still saved the day, but not as good as I'd like to have been able to show it. So that got me into thinking about finding an ISO recorder that I can put onto each camera. Now, of course, these are NDI. You could do an NDI on a computer, but I was trying to find something that was kind of a hardware base that I can set up in a case so that it was basically plug and play, and that I'd be able to record to it, but then pull out SSD drives from each of the recorders and be able to edit if I had to after the event. So going into looking at all the different ISO recorders out there, from Blackmagic, from Data Video, from AJA, and of course then also from Atomos, I kind of came across the Atomos Studio 2 here, which is this one right over here. This intrigued me because not only it's got 2 basically Shogun Flame recording devices and monitors on either side, but it could take the signal from a 4K signal and split it across 4 SDI inputs so that you can go ahead and get 4 SDI on either side here. So, you know, this would be basically your 4K coming in if you just had that. But if you did it into the quad mode, you could do 1080 here, there, on all 4 of those, and you would get the screen that you see in front over here. What was also kind of intriguing is that this screen is actually a touch screen. So I could actually physically go in here and switch between each one just from tapping onto the screen. So now also it's now a switcher besides an ISO recorder. And that's for, you know, the main system over here. It's kind of what I really like about that is the fact that you've got 4 recording ISOs over here, and you also have 4 recording ISOs over here. And because it's in a quad switching mode, whatever is highlighted, let's see if we can zoom in on it. You see the square here is highlighted. That is being recorded to a, program. The program, you'll see it on the monitor, program feed as well. So in other words, on this one SSD drive, zoom out here, this little SSD down the bottom here, and you could be recording 4 isolated video sources plus a program source based on that switch. And if you took the output from this program source it's possible to be able to feed it into your secondary one and maybe give you, and that way if you wanted to just have it as a standalone recorder, of course we're seeing all of this right now, or if you wanted to go ahead and have it as another source and add a few more so that this becomes your main source. This is kind of your sub switch, your main switch. You could be switching between cameras and then maybe here between computer sources or another feed here if you need be. And you would get that in here onto a master recording here. So to me, that sounds like it would really work for what I want to do. So what I love about this thing is that I can actually record up to 8 channels of 1080p 60 or 59.94 video plus a program on either of these dual recording monitors. So relatively speaking, I have 10 recording devices in this one unit right here, in this one rack mount 3 units high type of device here. To me, that seemed to be like the best thing to be able to put into a case, you know, where I can create my little rolling fly pack, as they call it, and put that in there and be able to go ahead and record from it. Now, the other thing that I do like about it is that you know, just like the Shogun Flame, you have all of the features that you would have for being able to do any sort of video assist type of stuff. You got your down here, you can set up your bars if you wanted to, your waveforms and such like that. You know, all the features that you would have available on a video assist monitor, you can have on here as well. So that's kind of great. Also, the fact that, you know, I've always been a visual switcher. Ever since I started trying to upgrade from my old SD switching system into HD world back in 2012. I was always trying to, I was always working with some software switchers at the time that allow me to be able to do a touchscreen tap on my camera source instead of a button, because I had a terrible tendency of switching on the fly and not being able to see where I'm switching to. So I like the idea of being able to see what I was seeing on my monitor over here. So with this, all I have to do to be able to switch is tap on the source I want to do as such, just by, and you could set it up so that instead of a single tap, you could do a double tap where you can go ahead and tap on where you want to have your source next. All right, so you see that there is a red highlight there. If I go ahead and go into this one tap hard cut, I can switch that to a 2-touch hard cut with Q. So what that gives me now is that I can actually tap into my green screen here and or my preview. So the green around the frame becomes my preview, and then if I tap it again, I switch to it. Simple as that. Again, if I tap it over here, then it comes over here. This could be my preview. This could be coming up on my preview. That could be next. But that way I can go ahead and set it up. And then once I tap it again, I switch to that source. So if you hadn't already realized that I'm actually using the Studio 2 here, the Shogun Studio 2, as my switcher for this multi-camera hands-on review. Some other things that it has on the positive side is that also there's a redundant on the power supply. Back here, you've got 2 AC plug-ins. So for some reason, one of them gets kicked out, you'll still have power coming to the unit itself. So it's kind of a little bit of redundancy. So there's a lot of great things about the idea of being able to record up to 8 ISO sources onto one unit over here. And so it seemed to me like it was the dream machine. I mean, based on the cost, I think originally it was released around $3,600. It's now available for about $29.95 off of B&H. So it's come down, but this was actually released back in 2019, so just pre-COVID. And so it didn't really get a lot of attention from my perspective. That's why I kind of getting into doing this hands-on review now, because to me it seemed like it was going to be the wet dream, the perfect device to be able to have. I could use it as a switcher if I needed to, or I can go ahead and, or basically for the main purpose of recording the ISOs from each of the camera. All right, so those are all the great things about it. Now, on the not so great things about it, I did some research, worked on some user groups, and I got some feedback on people on what they like and didn't like about it. Unfortunately, for most folks, the reliability issue was probably the biggest. Because one thing you got to consider from looking at the device over here is that you've got one SSD right here, all 4 ISOs plus a program if you're in switching is being recorded onto this SSD. So you have basically one point of failure. If that SSD goes out, all those recordings could get corrupted or so, or there's a glitch. Now, one of the issues that most people was having was that frame rate and resolution is based on whatever is being inputted into camera 1 source. So the problem is if you have a bad cable or bad connection, or your camera 1 or video or channel 1 video source goes out, it knocks out all the other ones at the same time. Now there is a way around that, and I don't know if you realize it or not. Let's see if I can zoom out over here. But I've got a decimator for my camera 1 source coming in here. Let me go ahead and get a closer shot of that. So this decimator is being used to take my, in this case, my HDMI from my Canon R5C, and scaling it. Basically, it's still 1080 59.94 going through it, but it's converted it to SDI. But one of the cool things about the decimator here is that you can select what source it should base its frame rate. And one of the things you can do it from either the inputs, or you can set it up for free run. So in this case, I set it for free run so that when this source gets interfered, gets dropped out, or anything like that, it doesn't lose a signal to your channel 1 input over here. And then that keeps all of the other things on the matrix still in play. So all of this still stays in here, and I can show you a quick example of it as I pull off one here. We haven't lost the rest of them, and we're still recording. So that's kind of a cool option. And then when I put this back in, you can see that it's coming up, but everything else still remain recorded. So that's one of the options that we have to be able to keep the reliability and not lose 4 recordings at one time in case we lose signal 1. Now that's a workaround, and it's one of the things that I had thought of myself, but also got validated by another gentleman on the user group who shared that that's what they do with their system. That's their rack-mounted system. Also, one of the other things, when you look at the video displays direct on, it's pretty clear. But if you start looking from an angle over here, the screen seems a little washed. So like if you're working in a production environment and you're having to basically place it at an unusual angle, not directly on, it's a little washed out. So it's not like the greatest thing to be able to check out. Now, one of the other benefits of the recorder like this is that it does record all the video sources in QuickTime ProRes, LT, HD, or standard. So you're getting a high quality video recording. However, it takes up a lot of space, and maybe some of these additional cameras don't necessarily have to have that high of a quality. The program, maybe yes, but some of the other ones, they're just kind of a backup. I mean, so if I did a 1 terabyte SSD drive, and I have all 4 sources going on at the same time and a program, I'm only getting maybe about an hour and a half. I'll be lucky if I get 2 hours of record time in LT, in QuickTime ProRes Lite. So that's one of the things you have to consider, especially in the long form. Now, there are some other ISO recorders out in the market that also do have the option to be able to encode those sources in H.256 or even 254 to help reduce the file sizes on your SSD. So another factor to consider on kind of the con side. Speaking of the SSD, again, this is your single point of failure. And what I noticed during one of my events, one of my first events, I ended up trying to use this as a switcher, is that there were some hiccups along the way. And I don't know whether it was because I had a bad connection on channel 1. This is pre-decimator use on the channel 1. But the files would end up starting a new folder and re-recording all the ISOs in the program. So it would do that a couple of times. So I ended up doing a second event where I did have this time the decimator on there, but I ended up still getting a pause somewhere in the middle of the first act, and then it started back up again, probably around 7 seconds. So I had about a 7-second gap there. So I'm wondering if also whether some of the hiccups may be related to the speed of the SSD you have in there. So, you know, especially, I would definitely say when you're putting in your SSD, go ahead and do a dry run recording and make sure that it could do as many of the ISO channels and program that you want to do, or if you're just doing ISOs. But the biggest problem I have with that is that once that hiccup happens, audio gets out of sync oftentimes, especially on the program side of the house. And I just did a test where I was recording just one channel program and one input channel to see whether, and I got a hiccup only within a few seconds. Again, I'm not sure whether it's the SSD causing that issue. Now it didn't start a new folder, but the audio all of a sudden drifted and went out of sync and went back and started going again from a point further on. I can actually show you a demonstration of that. And that wasn't good. Now it did that on the program side, but when I check on the ISO for channel 1, where I also have the analog recording coming in on channel 1, that audio was still good. So it only really affected my program. One of the other issues I have when it comes to audio is that I was taking the SDI out from the first unit here. So whatever the program would be, it would be going to SDI, and I was sending it through a link to the input of channel 1 onto the second unit, so that I'd be able to see both a program feed at the same time based on what else I was switching here, back and forth. And I can just tap through and get all through this. Problem is that I was hoping that the audio from the program feed here would feed into my channel 1 where I was inputting this feed into. The output, there was no audio output from the SDI out. I'm not sure about the HDMI, but from the SDI out, there was no audio output. I had to basically put a little jumper of the output of the analog from the first unit side and input it as an input onto the second unit over here, just so that I can get some audio. And then that way I'm seeing it over here. Speaking of which, these are really crazy small monitors for audio. Let's see if I can zoom in on there. So you can barely see. See if I can bump the gain up here a little bit so you can see what's going on. All right, so you can see I've got one channel of audio coming in. I actually had split off of the decimator for my main camera and that's coming in on channel 2, so that's what you're seeing, some of that audio over here. And then on my audio side, I've got that one channel being my main record source, and you would select which one of these you want your audio being recorded from. Actually, in record mode right here, you don't see any record buttons. You don't know which one you actually record, other than the fact that it's colored right now, right over here. So that way you know that that is your main record source. So, so that was kind of a bummer, because all of a sudden, even though I had a hiccup on the first side of it, going back to here, my hiccup happened over here, and it threw off the audio, started new folders. I still had a continuous video recording coming into the first channel over here, so I had a nice continuous file, but there was no audio. So I had to synchronize the audio, luckily from the Zoom FX8 that I have, and I was recording my main audio from, with my program that I had coming into here. So that's what was happening there. Okay. Audio is one of those things where this is not an audio device. The reliability of your audio onto your program has been a failure. That it's unfortunate. So definitely, if you can, have a backup audio source recording in case you get hiccups, so that you could probably fix it in post. The other thing is that I've heard some people talk about the fact that they don't like the drive the way it is in the Caddy. They're not. Some people are okay with the Caddies. This is your standard Atomos Caddy. I think I have one lying around here I can show you. All right, so this is your standard Atomos Caddy. I've got a 1 terabyte drive in here. It's got grooves in it so that it fits in. This is what they use on your portable monitor, your portable Ninjas and your Shogun and stuff like that. Now, some people were not crazy about having the Caddy and just wanted to have straight SSD drives that fit into their system afterwards when they want to do any post-production editing and all that. So one gentleman in Switzerland became very inventive and actually created a 3D print sleeve or adapter to be able to put in front of it. Let's see, we're going to go to it right here. You can see he's got the Caddy over here. You can see how it fits. You can see that there's a standard SSD drive, but that's what it looks like. And he was able to print that. Let's show you kind of a quick video of that as it's being used. So you can see it's kind of something that slips in. It almost has the same shape, but it allows you to go ahead and use a bare SSD to be able to plug into it, which is kind of convenient, kind of a cool thing. Some of the other users out there, biggest complaints was the no connectivity to the unit itself. On the back, you'll see that they actually do have, so on the back, you can see that they actually do have some connections over here. But you've got basically a network connection and a USB. I was told that in the first version of the Shogun Studio, that you could actually utilize the network port and be able to do some control of the unit itself through the bit focus companion, as well as another controlling software, ARM, I believe it was called. However, when the second version of this unit came out, basically they became unavailable for any controlling other than through the serial RS422 ports, which there's not that many controllers out there anymore that utilize that. So there was some disappointment on not being able to access it, and then if you read in the manual, basically they have been disabled for users to use, and therefore basically technical troubleshooting and maintenance, which was kind of a shame. you really should go ahead and try to bring that back. We'll talk about that on some maybe feature requests later on. But not being able to access that, or being able to have, it would be great to be able to access through a TCP network connection some of the files on the SSD directly, so you could do some management from outside of the unit without having to pull the drives out and bring them in to your system, whatever you're using for your post-production work. Now let's go for one of the things I thought was kind of the coolest thing aspect of it was that this could be utilized as a switcher. You know, with the 4 panels over here, you could go ahead and switch between them. That being the case, you know, this is a great touchscreen screen. However, these are really, really small to be able to kind of like be able to monitor. Let me bring the gain down on that so we can see a little better. If you're having to go ahead and use this source for like presetting one of the other PTZs while your program is coming out, in this case the program is on this camera up here, it's not very big. And unfortunately, the HDMI and the SDI output is locked into the program only. So basically, wherever is coming in is selected as the video source for the program is what's going out through the SDI and the HDMI. So from a switcher perspective, it would be nice to be able to have a larger perspective or multi-view, or even maybe at least the preview if you're going to offer the preview option of doing the double tap, to be able to preset your framing either through your cameraman or through your PTZ or yourself. So that was kind of one of the things that was kind of disappointing, is that there's no option for what's being outputted, and the fact that also that output has no audio at all from, it's not feeding any audio out. So if you're having an additional redundant recording source coming out, you're only recording the video. All right, so I'd love this device, this unit, this Shogun Studio 2. It seemed to be like everything I could wish for in one unit, and that would be able to give me recordings on multiple non-recording cameras or pan-tilt zoom cameras, as well as a program, and as well as using it as a switcher. It's just, it's a feature-rich unit compared to anything else out there. It records in ISOs the most amount of ISOs than any other device for the price. And having the little switcher is just a plus. I wouldn't rely on the audio as much, so I would definitely make sure that there's a backup audio going on outside of this, so you have yourself covered as far as the recording aspect of it. Now what's being outputted through the analog is good, so if you're feeding any other source, that's fine, but not having any audio going through the output, SDI or HDMI, it makes for the redundant recording from that source or feed to somewhere else not usable. So that was kind of disappointing. So once again, the other thing is that this whole unit is basically one point of failure for multiple camera ISOs over here. So if something were to happen with this, it may not necessarily be power, but you could have a failure on the SSD drive, or let's say if your decimator goes out or your channel 1 goes out, you're going to have some failures there. It will interfere with that. So it becomes kind of a risk. So my recommendation is that so far, from what I've been able to use this, I would use it as an ISO recorder. Switcher, I did try to do it, but I had to do post-production fixes on it, so that's not good. So I don't know if that would be something that I would try to use for the future. I like the idea of everything being all in one unit and being able to switch between it, but on the recording aspect of it, at least the programming recorded side, it was disappointing. All right, so let's talk about some feature requests probably for Studio 3. Let's talk about, I would say right off the bat, some of the things that we talked about, kind of work on some fixes, but I'm just going to go ahead and list some things, not in any particular order. And probably the key thing that I would like to be able to see is that you do have a loop-through for your first input going back out again if you set it up, if you're doing a single feed coming in. But if you're doing a quad feed on the back over here, and you've got 4 sources here, you only have inputs. You do not have a loop-through that you could send to your switcher. So in my case, I would think that I would use this in between my camera sources and my switcher for the main program that I'm recording off a switcher, where I have better controls, better monitoring, multi-view displays, and being able to add my special effects and lower thirds and everything else. Not having that loop-through is disappointing for the most part. The other thing, we talked about the fact that I had to put a decimator on my channel 1 source in order to keep a video feed going through there. So it would be great if they could set it, at least maybe find a way where once you start recording through some internal timecode generation, free run timecode, whatever the resolution and the frame rate was when the recording starts, it stays the same no matter whether you lose a signal on any of the inputs coming in. That would be a really helpful thing, and probably not, I would say, not too technically hard to do, but something to consider for your version 3 of the Shogun Studio, the Shogun Studio 3. You know, also there's only, if you look, there's only SDI inputs for the quad. There is no HDMI. If you could add an HDMI, that would be great. Also, speaking of the HDMI, right now I've got this going out to a monitor so that I'm able to monitor what's going on, but it's only the program output. It would be great if we would actually have the ability to select what output would be going to that, kind of like choosing an aux, whether your aux is from camera 1, 2, or 3, or 4. That way you could send 2 different feeds between the SDI and the HDMI that have 2 different views, like a program or a multi-view or a preview or an aux output for another source. For some reason, that would be great. I think that would be great. Right now, I know there's the Caddy is being used to be able to go ahead and mount the SSD. But if you could probably find a way to be able to make it Caddy-less, and being able to mount directly, as like I showed earlier, I think that would be great. The utilizing the Cat5 back here, your network port, to be able to do some controls through a Stream Deck with the TCP programs or API calls, but also even being able to possibly access some of the, like through a web interface, some of the controls and settings on the unit itself would be great. It's basically what most of us are all used to doing right now anyway. Through the PTZs, we're all going through some web. My switcher right here also is going through, has a web interface as well, so I can actually select. My decimator has a program access, so I can go ahead and select which input is going to be my source for the scaling. Everything has, we're all used to having some sort of back-end access to the units that we have, and it would be great to have it here on the Studio 3 to be able to control some of this stuff that's going on over here. And also, again, most importantly, some people would like to just go ahead and be able to transfer files afterwards or do some maintenance through the network connection there. So I know right now a lot of the Atomos devices do not allow you to make any deletions of files without putting it onto a computer unless you completely wipe out your drive. So that way they want to make sure that everything stays, the integrity of everything is in place and you don't inadvertently delete an important file. Sure, I can understand that, but you know, some of us actually know what we're doing, and we'd like to be able to control that. So maybe there's a safety version of the access to the file system, and then there's the advanced version for the adults in the room. So that would be great. So when there's a dropout with one of the channels, something like that, it would be great if there was something on the screen that could show us this, that there was a dropout. As a matter of fact, when one of the other things that another gentleman had mentioned to me is that he thought it would be great to be able to have on the display have another option that basically gives you much larger printout of that it's recording, that what the file name is, and all the information, what the audio levels are. So it's not this little small thing over here and the little record button with the square, or in this case the square going over here. Something that if you have this in a rack and you're across the room, that you can visually take a look at it. And speaking of one, it would be great to have some sort of warning notification as well if there's a drop frame, or if audio goes out, or even better yet, something besides the red border here. One of the things, have an alert set up so that if it's not recording, you have a stripe going across saying not recording, not recording, not recording. Something like that is obvious that if I'm not recording, it's an alert, and it's one of the few alerts that vMix has, the not recording, or if audio drops below a certain level, it gives you a warning. But once I do start recording on here, that goes away. So that would be great to have on one of the displays over here. That way, like what happened to me at that one event, as I look over, as I'm using that recording monitor as my main feed to make sure that I'm saying, I can see that, oh, by the way, I'm not recording. Because sometimes you are so zoned in when you're in the thick of it that seeing the little red line over here, it's just not doing anything. But seeing this nice bright flashing red not recording thing will definitely let you know that, hey, dummy, you double tap the record button. Try it again, and let's capture everything, so you don't need to have all this ISO stuff. So the warning things. Speaking of the SSDs, you know, it'd be great to have some sort of internal test, basically, that you can access, that you can go ahead and put basically an endurance test or a stress test on an SSD to make sure that the one you got isn't too cheap and it is fast enough to be able to handle 5 ProRes programming sources here, and give you some sort of report. And whether if it ends up getting a hiccup or kicks out or something like that, you would know what that is. So that would be a great thing to have, some sort of speed endurance test. Talk about the headphone jack. Right now it's a 3.5 millimeter jack. It'd be great for some of the more pro studio types. They would rather have a standard 1/4 inch or 6.3 millimeter jack for the headphones, so that they're more sturdy and not potentially could get yanked, or a 3.5 could get yanked and break both either the jack or or break off the plug itself easily. Having a more sturdier output would be great. One of the other users from the group of users that I contacted mentioned that even though you can go ahead and you can press this record button and hold, and it will start both at the same time, it's not necessarily reliable that they are both starting at the same time. So he would like to be able to have some sort of internal option, some sort of menu option, to be able to select something that it could say that you press once and both drives will start at the same time. That way it's guaranteed that you can get that. Okay, well, this may have been a run-on, but you know, it is real world for the most part, and let's hope that the audio recorded correctly, because everything is being used and switched on this device right now. So we'll see how everything worked out. I want to thank you for hanging in there with me on this kind of a live, hands-on type of thing as I stumble through. My overall impression is that as an ISO recorder, I think it works great. As the end of a solution, I would have a switching system, even though it's possible to do some switching from here. The fact that the program, the SDI and the HDMI out, does not include any audio kind of nixed the ability to be able to plug the output into another recording source for your master recording. You have to rely on being able to have what's inside here, so then you have a potential point of failure here. So overall, if it's ISO recordings of the video, that's fine, but the unreliability of the audio and the audio sync makes me think that it's best to go ahead and have an external audio source recording at the same frame rate that you're using for your video, and just record the ISOs only. If we do some of the improvements that we mentioned, having the loop-throughs, talking about some of the warnings to some of the output display capabilities, and fixing the audio, and then the speed test and a few of the other things, this would be a great unit for the next version, the 2025, because I don't know they're going to be able to get anything out before NAB in 2024. But I've just dated the video. Yes, this is being reviewed in 2023, and this is the status of it. The unit itself, when I was looking for ISO recorders, it seemed like this was the dream machine. In reality, yes, it will record the ISOs, but all the other kind of special features. Now, I didn't go much into the camera assist features because they're pretty well known and pretty useful. But I was looking at it from a live multicam production person aspect of it, whether it could be used as a switcher, whether it be reliable as an ISO recorder. The answer is, it depends. As long as all your connections are good and your sources are solid, and basically if you're rack mounting it, great. If you're having to go on location, a one-time event, I would have backup sources as well. So I hate the fact that I have to say that, because I really did have a lot of hope for the unit. And if I were to get one, I would still use it. I would just have to go ahead and split off the video sources, so that I have a split off that go into another switcher where I can go ahead and add some of my other switching devices. Again, because my source coming out doesn't have any audio, and it's not very. I don't have good monitoring options for using this as a switcher. So, well, that's it for today. I look forward to doing another product review. If you have any questions or anything that you think I should have mentioned as well, some other things that you may have dealt with, or some other features you would like to have, feel free to add them to the comments over here. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on T3 TV.